man in the Bible who is 9 feet 9 inches tall, dressed in more metal than a car factory, and his full-time job is making grown men wet themselves. I'm not exaggerating. This guy is so terrifying that an entire trained army takes one look at him and decides, as a group, that running away is actually a valid military strategy. And the person who finally takes him down isn't a soldier. He's not even old enough to legally fight in this war. He's a teenage shepherd who showed up that morning to deliver cheese sandwiches to his brothers. If that doesn't make you want to know what happens next, I genuinely don't know what will. Welcome to the most chaotic underdog story in the entire Bible, David and Goliath. His name is Goliath. He's from Gath, which honestly explains a lot, because nothing good ever comes from a place that sounds like a sneeze. He's the Philistines' secret weapon, except it's not really a secret because he's louder than a fire alarm and twice as annoying. Every single day, for 40 days straight, this man walks out and yells, "Send me your best guy," like he's hosting a very aggressive talent show nobody auditioned for. And every single day, the entire Israelite army does the exact same thing. They look at him, they look at each other, and then, in perfect synchronized choreography, they all take one giant step backward. 40 days of this, 40 days of not it. If procrastination was an Olympic sport, this army takes gold, silver, and bronze. Meanwhile, across town, there's a teenager named David. He's not a soldier. He's not even invited to this war. His job description is sheep babysitter. His biggest professional achievement up to this point is keeping a flock of wool-covered idiots from wandering into a lion's mouth, which, fun fact, he's already done, with his bare hands. But nobody's writing songs about that yet. David's dad sends him to the battlefield with the most important military supply known to man: cheese, and bread, and 10 loaves, because apparently his brothers are extremely hungry soldiers who are also somehow too scared to fight a giant, but never too scared to demand snacks. David shows up just in time to hear Goliath doing his daily stand-up comedy routine. Except the jokes are, "I will feed your corpses to birds," which, not gonna lie, is a rough way to open a set. The entire army is frozen, again. And David, this random shepherd kid who wasn't even supposed to be there, looks around and says something like, "Wait, you're all just letting this guy talk like that." His brother Eliab, who is older and therefore legally required to be annoying, immediately snaps at him. "Why are you even here? Go back to your sheep," which is rich, coming from a guy who's been standing in the same spot for 40 days, doing absolutely nothing except updating his will. But word gets around, because in any group chat, gossip travels faster than the actual enemy. Eventually, David ends up in front of King Saul himself. And David, with the confidence of someone who has never once considered that he might be wrong, says, "I'll fight him." Saul looks at this kid the way you'd look at someone who just volunteered to fight a bear using a pool noodle. "You're a kid. He's basically a war crime with legs." No. David's response is basically, "Relax. I've fought lions. I've fought bears. This guy's just a really tall lion who talks too much." And somehow, that works. Saul says fine, but at least wear some armor, because apparently even kings know you shouldn't show up to a sword fight wearing a bathrobe. So they put Saul's armor on David, and listen, this is comedy gold. Saul is a grown man, built like a king, and David is a teenage shepherd, built like, well, a teenage shepherd. Putting Saul's armor on David is like putting NBA gear on a kid from middle school. The helmet alone probably covered his whole face. He takes 2 steps, nearly falls over, and basically says, "Yeah, this isn't it," and takes the entire outfit off right there on the battlefield, in front of everyone. The most awkward fashion show in biblical history. Instead, David grabs his actual weapon of choice, a sling. 5 smooth stones. That's it. That's the loadout. Meanwhile, Goliath is walking around with a spear that has a head so heavy the Bible specifically points out how much it weighs, because apparently even ancient writers understood the comedy of, this man is compensating for something. Now, here's where it gets good. David walks toward Goliath, and Goliath looks at him and is, understandably, insulted. This 9-foot tower of muscle and bad attitude looks at a teenager holding a slingshot and says, paraphrasing here, "Are you kidding me? They sent a child with a stick." He's offended. He genuinely feels disrespected, Like the army looked at the most terrifying threat in the region and said, "Yeah, let's send the intern." Goliath starts talking trash, because that's literally his entire personality. He curses David. He threatens him. He basically does the trash talk version of flexing in the mirror at the gym for 40 straight minutes. And David, this teenage shepherd with zero military training and a bag of rocks, says something that should honestly be printed on a motivational poster. He says, paraphrasing again, "You've got a sword, a spear, and a javelin. I've got God, and honestly, my odds are better." Then, and this is the part nobody talks about enough, David runs at Goliath. He doesn't walk. He doesn't slowly approach with dramatic music. He sprints, full speed, toward a giant murder tower of a man, like he's late for a bus, except the bus is named Victory, and the bus stop is this guy's forehead. He pulls back the sling, lets one stone fly, and it hits Goliath directly in the forehead. One stone, one shot. Goliath, who probably skipped forehead day at the gym, drops face first into the dirt, like a tree that just lost an argument with a chainsaw. And just to make sure nobody starts any "is he really dead" debates, David runs over, grabs Goliath's own sword, because the man's actual weapon was too big for him to carry around as a souvenir, and finishes the job. The Philistine army, who 30 seconds earlier were extremely confident in their giant strategy, take one look at their headless champion and immediately remember they have somewhere very important to be, like anywhere else. They run, not a strategic retreat, just straight up running, screaming, the full panic sprint, because their entire battle plan was the big guy will handle it, and the big guy is currently in two pieces. The Israelite army, who spent 40 days frozen in fear, suddenly finds a whole lot of bravery they didn't know they had, and chases the Philistines down. Turns out courage is contagious. You just need one guy with a sling to start the trend. And David, this kid who showed up that morning just to deliver cheese to his brothers, ends up walking away the actual hero of the entire war. Talk about an upgrade in job title. Here's the part that actually matters past the jokes. Everybody in that army looked at Goliath and measured the size of the problem. David looked at the exact same giant and measured the size of his God. Same enemy, same battlefield. Two completely different outcomes, because the difference wasn't muscle, it was faith. The lesson is simple. The giants in your life, whatever they are, debt, fear, sickness, that one relative who comments on everything at family dinners, they look massive when you compare them to yourself, but they look a lot smaller when you compare them to God. You don't need the biggest sword. You don't need to look like the strongest one in the room. You just need to actually show up and bring whatever you've got, even if it's just 5 smooth stones and an unreasonable amount of confidence. Sometimes the giant doesn't fall because you're strong. He falls because you finally decided to stop running backward like everyone else.